What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Bring the Juice podcast. I'm your co-host, Derek Larger, as always, and with me today is Andrew. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Cody. It's good to be back. It's good to I'm glad to have been asked to fill in for Cody, and I'm ready to go.
All right, that's good, man. Yeah, so for anyone that's been following what we've been saying on Twitter, this will be probably the first episode that we have done since we hit the 1,000 mark earlier this week. Thank you all again so much for everyone who subscribed to the channel and follows us on Twitter. We really appreciate all of you. We're going to have a video uploaded at some point here soon to thank all of you properly. We're just kind of in a moment where Cody is on vacation at the moment and things are going so crazy with the new year and everything. So we're just going to go ahead and talk about some Colts news and some other free agent news and signing news. And the first one being that today, the Colts officially announced that Anthony Castonzo is now officially back with the team with a new deal of 2 years, $33 million, with the first year of his contract getting $17 million, and the next year is $16 million. I think most people are happy with this deal. Andrew, what did you think of this deal when it came out?
It's a major win for the Colts. I mean, had they not re-signed Castonzo, and I know Chris Ballard came out a few weeks ago at the combine and confirmed that it was going to happen, but hypothetically speaking, let's say that something may have gone in the wrong direction and they had not re-signed or he had chosen to retire or whatever, then you're talking about potentially having to spend a first-round pick, or at least an early pick on an offensive tackle, and that's not to say that the Colts shouldn't at least consider it. Maybe a third or fourth round pick because Castonzo is 32, or he's going to be 32. Um, but nonetheless, this is a major win for the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, this was a great win for the Colts to bring Anthony Castonzo back. We've been saying it so much that, a left tackle that, is probably top five easily in this league. It's certainly important to bring him back regardless of age. We saw at the beginning of last year that he said this was the healthiest he has felt since being in the NFL. So certainly doesn't seem like he has any he doesn't show any signs of slowing down, at least at the time. And like you said, Andrew, it's just a point of not having to worry about spending that first round or an early pick on a tackle versus being able to now put that towards other options and then waiting in a year or two to actually address it. And let's talk about the actual contract for a second. 2 years, so implies that he's not just thinking of coming back for this year and moving on. It actually seems like he's actually interested in sticking around for multiple years, which is very nice. And the $33 million actually states that he would be the highest paid left tackle by an average per year salary, which is pretty cool. I actually am quite surprised that that's the highest paid contract for a left tackle in this league. Since we're now seeing Castonzo with that, what did you think of the actual money perspective? Did you think it was spot on? Do you think we bargained with him, or do you think that was just a good deal for both ends?
I think it's a great deal for both ends. And as you had mentioned, Derek, you had said that it being a 2-year deal and not a 1-year deal. I was fortunate enough to cover the NFL Combine as part of the IUPUI Sports Capital Journalism program. And I was actually at Chris Ballard's press conference. And from what I understand, he said that originally they thought that the contract was going to be on a year-to-year basis. And so for Ballard and Castonzo to reach an agreement, as you had mentioned, Derek, on a multiple-year deal, that speaks volumes. Like you said, that doesn't necessarily say that he wants to come back for a season and then hang it up again. And then as far as the money, the $33 million a year, the $16 million 1 year, and the $17 million the following, I think it's a fantastic deal for both sides. I mean, as you had mentioned, Derek, Castonzo is arguably a top 5 offensive tackle in the entire NFL. And when you look at his production, and Frank Reich has mentioned that, he's not really somebody that he has to help with pass protection or in the run game. He he sort of is able to hold his own. You know, he's a veteran in this league, and he's an excellent player. And I think the Colts got a really, really, really nice deal.
Yeah, and it certainly helps with the new CBA being finalized and approved. The salary cap obviously increasing by 10 million this year, which is really nice. Gives the Colts a little bit more freedom to be able to use that few extra million to entice Castonzo to stick around, which is really nice. Like you said, there's no question that this is a great deal. Was enough to keep him around for a couple more years, but not something that was going to destroy the bank, which obviously for Colts fans' sake and for the Colts organization in and of itself can certainly appreciate on both ends there. Now, let's move transition here from one guy who got paid for the Colts to a in division rival and a guy who also got paid today. Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, is now under a new contract with a 4-year, $118 million contract with $91 million guaranteed. Andrew, what did you think of this contract when you first heard of this one?
I was a bit surprised, honestly, and let me say this: Ryan Tannehill absolutely deserved to get paid after the exceptional year that he had last season. But a 4-year, $118 million contract with, as you had mentioned, Derek, 91 million guaranteed. Obviously, the Titans may disagree with this, but I think that was maybe a bit much. I mean, you look
Mm-hmm.
at Ryan Tannehill as an overall quarterback. Since coming into the league, he's a 500. Um, um, excuse me, he is a 500 record quarterbacks. I think he's 49 and 49. And
Mm-hmm.
then you look at his age. I believe he's turning 32 this
Yes.
next year. So I mean, he's not in his early years in the league. He's been in the league for quite a while, and as I mentioned, I'm not opposed to him getting paid. He certainly deserved it. But maybe this might not turn out to be so good down the road for Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm on the same pace with you here. I was completely okay with him getting the money because, he came in under unfortunate circumstances, had to replace Marcus Mariota midway through the season, got thrown out there and just said, the team's yours, go out there and do it, right? And then throughout the regular season, had 2,700 yards passing in 9 games, had, basically 22 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Uh, he had a good regular season. Don't get me wrong. He certainly had some good times in that, and he certainly showed that he was basically a above average quarterback for part of the year, which is enough for teams to get far. We obviously saw when the Tennessee went into the playoffs, they obviously felt confident with Tannehill at the helm that he wasn't going to completely destroy their playoff chances. Uh, but yeah, I'm on the same page with you. This is way too much money for a slightly above average quarterback. I mean, you're paying this guy 29.5 million per year on an average annual basis. And a guy that in the playoffs, I know that he faced two good defenses in Baltimore and in the Patriots. I understand that, but I'm sorry. He threw for an average of 80 yards a game in those two games and threw a completion percentage of 52% on average in those two games. Now, in the Kansas City game, threw for a 63% completion percentage, had 200 plus yards. But I mean, he wasn't the guy that you said when the money was on the line, and he's the guy that you need to go out there and do what he needs to do. He's going to be the one. No, that was Derrick Henry for the playoffs all year long. And there's just no reason that he should be getting this much money. I would agree that with a maybe a 3-year, maybe a 90 to 100 million, even though I think that's still pretty high. But yeah, for a 4-year for a guy that's 32 years old, is an above average quarterback at best, it's just a little bit odd to me that, they would continue to do this. And not to mention with this, contract that Ryan Tannehill is getting. Now this most likely means that Tennessee is going to have to franchise tag Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry's not going to get the payday that he wants. What do you think about that? What do you think's on Derrick Henry's mind now that he's seeing this deal that Tannehill's getting?
I think Derrick Henry wants his money, and rightfully so. I mean, the guy was a battering ram, running downfield for the most part. I mean, especially in the playoffs, as you had mentioned, Derrick Henry was the engine that made that car move. And that's not an indictment on Ryan Tannehill by any means. But Derrick Henry was really the key component to the Titans' playoff success this past season. And I think he's going to want his money. I think he's going to want to be paid, and as I said, rightfully so. And maybe he'll sit out during training camp if they franchise tag him. Maybe he'll want to play elsewhere because he wants to go where somebody can actually pay him, and he doesn't want to be franchise tagged. From what I understand, honestly, I think they're letting Derrick Henry test the open market, which I think is actually a big mistake. Now, maybe they'll come back in a few days once the new league year starts and free agency opens, and they'll franchise tag him. Now, as I mentioned, I don't think he would be too happy with that, considering, like you had said, Derek, with the amount of money that Ryan Tannehill just got paid. But hypothetically speaking, let's say he hits the open market, or let's say during the time in which he's testing the open market, he signs with a new team. They just released, they being the Titans, Dion Lewis, and now you lost Derrick Henry. Now you have no solution at running back. Of course, you could obviously draft one, but at that point, that player is considered unproven. And now you're stuck with Ryan Tannehill at the helm, who you just gave $118 million to, with no solid starting running back. And that could turn out to be a really big issue.
Yeah, and I've been under the component that under the improvisation that the Titans were going to probably go with a running back in the first round of this year's draft anyway. So I'm not necessarily surprised that they are going to let Derrick Henry go. But it is kind of really funny to think about just what Derrick Henry was last year, having the most rushing yards in the entire NFL last season, being, quote unquote, the best running back in the NFL when you look at yards, clearly the most dominant running back of all of those in the NFL this last year. May not have been the best, but he was the most dominant when it counted. And, just to now think he most likely is not going to return to the team, which is kind of funny. It just goes to show you the little amount of advantage and leverage that these running backs have. I mean, honestly, the Tennessee Titans just gave a $30 million a year contract to an above average quarterback, but to the best running back in the NFL at the moment, the most dominant one, at least you could say, he's probably not going to get a contract from them. It's really funny to think about that when you really dig down into it. But yeah, like I said, I don't think that it's going to change much for them. I think they obviously were cutting Dion Lewis. So if their plan is to let Derrick Henry go ahead and test the free agent market, it's quite possible that the Tennessee Titans are going to look for a running back in the first round of this year's draft, because there's a couple of guys out there that definitely can leave you with some good impressions. You got DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, a couple of really good guys who I honestly think they should go for a J.K. Dobbins over a Derrick Henry anyway, because J.K. Dobbins just is a multifaceted running back that just helps your team in more ways than what Derrick Henry does. But anyway, so now we're going to stay in the division. Last thing that we're going to talk about here, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars have basically come to an agreement with the Ravens to trade Calais Campbell to them for a 5th round pick in this next year's draft. Isn't it crazy to think that this Jaguars team just a few years ago had Jalen Ramsey, AJ Bouye, Calais Campbell, and a couple of other guys that I know I'm missing. Barry Church is in there and a couple other guys that I'm missing in there. They're all gone now. And obviously they're Yannick is basically on his way out too, from what we hear, because even though he's franchise tagged, he said that he does not want a long-term deal with them and that he plans to just basically hold out until they get a trade for him. Isn't this just remarkable just how much firepower this team had on its defense just a few years ago, and now almost all of it's gone now?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of an eye opener as to how quickly this league can change and how quickly teams can go from being a top contender to maybe sort of hitting the reset button. And I feel like that's what Jacksonville's doing. With the trade of AJ Boye to the Denver Broncos in the last few weeks, and then you have the surprising trade of Calais Campbell. And one thing that I did read earlier, I believe it was from Ian Rappaport, was the Jaguars weren't looking to trade Calais Campbell. And the Baltimore Ravens reached out and offered a fourth round pick. And I am genuinely surprised, I'm sure as you are and so many others as well, that the Jaguars were foolish enough to accept it. I mean, yes,
Yeah,
you look at the age of Calais Campbell, but you also have to look at the production. He's
yeah,
been by far one of the most productive defensive ends in the last several seasons. I mean, he's made several Pro Bowls. And as you had mentioned, Derek, that Jaguars defense with Ngakoue, with Campbell, with Miles Jack, with Barry Church and Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye, just 3 years ago, we're in the AFC Championship game and we're 4 minutes away and 10 points up on the New England Patriots from potentially making the Super Bowl. And, we of course know how that ended, but just 3 years later, I mean, it looks like they're kind of hitting the reset button. And here we thought as Colts fans, the Texans were the gift that keeps on giving. The Jaguars might be a close second
yeah.
because they're making some really interesting moves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just to mention that Calais Campbell, not necessarily too old. He's still one of the most dominant inside run defenders that you get. I could be wrong here, but I thought that I saw a statistic either last year or 2 years ago that he had like 3 or 4 sacks against Tennessee one game. I mean, it's remarkable that they just let a potential Pro Bowl defensive tackle go for a 5th round pick. That just doesn't make much sense to me. Not to mention not only what he does on the field, what he does off the field. This man was man of the year by the NFL. What was it in 2017 or 18? I mean, this guy is definitely a very likable person, a very accepted person in the locker room. It's just really odd that they would have gave him away for this little a price, which leads me to my last question for you, Andrew. Is it officially time to see that or to say that the Jacksonville Jaguars are setting the presser on tanking for Trevor Lawrence next year?
Um, I wouldn't really go that far just yet. From what I understand and from the different articles I've read and the sources I've looked at, um, from what I understand, I think they're wanting to move on from Nick Foles and go on to Gardner Minshew. I think that they believe that they have a quality starting quarterback in Minshew. And Minshew, to his credit, played very well last season in the times that he
Mm-hmm.
was asked to. He stepped up when they needed him to. Now, of course, Jacksonville obviously didn't make the playoffs, but for a 6th round pick, I mean, you can't really play any better than he did. And they realize now that giving Foles 88 million dollars,
Yeah.
something like that, guaranteed, or at least a portion of that guaranteed, wasn't really all that worth it. His Super Bowl run more so had to do with the offense that was ran in Philadelphia with Frank Reich and Doug Peterson and the amount of weapons that they had. Um, but I think they're going to move forward with Gardner Minshew and then sort of hit the reset button, particularly on defense, because now they're down 2 starting corners at defensive end, and getting ready to be 2 defensive ends with Ngakoue holding out, waiting for a trade. So yeah, I think the Jaguars are in a really really interesting position, and it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward.
Yeah, interesting is certainly the right word here. I mean, not to mention, most assume that Leonard Fournette is going to be not there for the beginning of this season as well. His feelings with the Jacksonville Jaguars are very bad as well. So basically, what you have in Jacksonville now is you're having a 6th round pick at quarterback, which is they're going to start a average offensive line, no running back. Your best wide receiver is DJ Chark, and then you have you have no Ngakoue, you have no Calais Campbell, You have no Jalen Ramsey. You have no AJ Bouye. I mean, it really does feel like they are completely starting the reset button, which is odd just because a few years ago they were a few minutes away from making it to the Super Bowl, and now they just look like they literally have no players left.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best, Derek. I mean, they're just a few minutes away from making I believe, their first Super Bowl appearance. From if I remember correctly, don't quote me on that. I could look foolish, but and now, like you said, now it just looks like, particularly on defense, that they've hit the reset button, and it'll be interesting, like I said, to see what they do moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly can say that starting tomorrow, Monday, March 16th, with legal tampering starting, it doesn't appear to most people that the NFL is, it doesn't seem like the NFL is going to stop the league year from starting on the 18th, which definitely is a nice thing for some of us who are desperately wanting some sort of sports content. There's certainly going to be a lot of it this week with the legal tampering starting if the NFL doesn't do anything. So that's it for us, guys. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you guys
Always.
again so much for the 1,000 subscribers. We really do appreciate all of you, and thank you so much for all the support. Like I said, we'll have a couple other videos thanking you all properly here soon, and some other content as well, starting with free agency. Thank you guys as always, and go Colts.